Oh, wow. Hey, much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Yeah, pure life. Thank you for tuning in. Once again, appreciate you guys making the time, out of your day to be here. All right, appreciate you. We're going to get into a real quick uh, lesson here regarding the ancient medical practices of the Americans, so called indigenous Americans. Okay. As you guys can see here, you see this drawing? You see some swarthy, copper colored, brown complexion individuals. You see, this is the book Medical Practices in Ancient America. And it has it in English and Spanish at the same time. This is by Miguel Guzman Peredo. And we're going to read a little bit of this book just to get some knowledge on how they got down, in the true old world. All right. Shortly after the Spaniards had arrived on the soil of America, they began to realize that the medical practice, which they found was truly advanced, and the conquerors never ceased to be amazed. Not only among the Incas, but also among the Aztecs, did the knowledge of anatomy, physiology, pathology, as well as the frequent and accurate use of myriads of medical plants evoke the highest praises of the chroniclers who gathered the most esteemed accounts of the lands recently won over for the Spanish crown. The zealous historian of medicine, Guzman Somolinos de Ardoy, for example, tells us that the Mexican history of medicine commences with the first man who took up the pen to describe the country which he had conquered in a remarkable manner, Hernan Cortez. In his second narrative letter, dated October 1520, describes, for Emperor Charles V, all right, a Swarty, this is a black man, Emperor Charles V, Cortez, all these people, right? More and more war, you get it? Charles V, the places where herbs are sold in the crowded marketplaces. In addition to Cortez, there are other chroniclers, the first Spanish news correspondents in America, like Diaz del Castillo, Motolinia, Sahagún, Torquemada, Mendieta, Gomara, Cieza de León, Fernandez de Oviedo, and many, many others. These journalists found not only in Mesoamerica but also in the Caribbean and the Andes, and the formidable accounts took upon themselves the task of relating the subject of American medicine, which with great impact would evoke wonder and surprise in the minds of the first Europeans who traveled through the extensive lands of America. With respect to the Aztecs, we shall say that Tezcatlipocan and Xipe were considered the highest gods of medicine. The former is believed to be the discoverer of Oxilt, sacred resin, utilized for numerous illnesses. The latter was the god of revenge, par excellence, since he would aim deadly thunderbolts at terrified mortals. Tezcatlipoca, the creator of heaven and earth and the eternal adversary of Quetzalcoatl, was also held in high esteem. The former was considered to be the inexorable punisher of the vicious and the corrupt. People begged the latter for the recovery of health in cases of catarrh and rheumatism, and women, desperate because of their barrenness, would also supplicate the god Tlaltesium, was the holy patron of sick children. He was in fact a kind of divine pediatrician. There also were the goddesses, Sihuacolt, who according to ancient Mexicans was the first woman who procreated, the biblical Eve of the primitive inhabitants of Tenochtitlan, and Xochiquetzal, symbol of proactive force, who was the goddess of fertility and consequently of pregnant women. This deity, under other names, Matlacueye, or Matlacueyay, and Mequilchotli, intervened in the period of puerperium. Centeolt, the goddess of the earth and of medicine, was highly revered by doctors, by surgeons, and by bloodletters, and also, according to Sahagun, by midwives, and by those who applied herbs to cause abortion. This Centeolt was the goddess of the Temazcatli, under the name of Temazcaltosi. The art of medicine, Tisiot, formed part of the functions which a father taught his children or prodigies. He would take them to visit the sick to show them the cause of the illness, making them see the main symptoms and indicating to them the most convenient therapeutic technique to follow in each particular case. In this respect, it is important to point out that not a few chroniclers were quite surprised at the high level of advancement which the Aztecs had reached in the medical sciences. Because of this, we cannot but set down with some suspicion that wishes affirmed by Cervantez de Salazar in his Chronicle of New Spain. He begins writing, "Of all the physicians and surgeons existing among the Indians, most were superstitious sorcerers who took no account either of the constitution of bodies or the quality of food, so much so that if one asked them about the power of herbs and powders which were used to cure, and the time of their application, they would not know and would only answer that their ancestors had cured in that manner. In answering this way, they think that they have accomplished not a little. The result of all this is that the patient submitting to such cures runs a great risk, and if by chance he is cured, it is by pure luck." So, you know, talking about people practicing things that they don't know that, but they're saying the ancestors passed it down. Remember, like, if they talk about the newcomers, when the Europeans got to Mexico, the Aztec Empire, these were Johnny latecomers. They had just established their empire in the 1300s, So there's a lot of migration of different peoples in Mexico. So they're saying the ancestors passed them all this knowledge. The author's saying they couldn't tell you the science behind it. They just knew that their ancestors said, "Hey, this is what heals this is what heals that," right? So, you gotta dodge the hijack a little bit with what they thought, too. Anyways, continuing. These doctors, in the case of falls, usually strip the patient and rub his flesh. They make him lie face downwards and step on his back. I have seen this myself and have heard patients say that they felt better. After describing the Aztec physicians as great sorcerers, Cervantes de Salazar ends by saying, "The pity of it is that there are even Spanish men and women who believe them and are manipulated to serve their needs and evil." Oh, you gotta dodge the hijack with this guy for sure. Continuing. Among the Aztecs, the office of healer, in the best sense of the word, had several divisions. 1. Tlanatepati Tixilt, who was the intern of today and cured with medicines which were digested or applied on the skin. And 2. Texoxotla Tisilt, the surgeon, was the name used to designate bloodletters. We see in Tenochtitlan, as well as in different European countries, that there were enforced the same social differences among those who practiced medicine. The one of the highest category was the doctor, properly so called. He was followed by the surgeon. Then came the bloodletter, an office fulfilled in Europe by barbers and phlebotomists. Finally, as far as Mexico before the arrival of Cortez is concerned, and not necessarily in the order of lesser importance, came the Papiani Papamakani, who was the herbalist, who, after having traveled through the thickest parts of jungles, wild valleys, and craggy places, returned to the city with a load of medicinal plants, which he would soon use to cure many illnesses. For Bernardino de Sahagún, Mexican doctors had great knowledge of vegetables. Moreover, they knew how to perform bloodletting and to reduce dislocated bones and fractures. They made incisions. They healed sores and the gout. They cut the fleshy excrements in cases of ophthalmia, inflammation of the eyes. Indubitably, ancient doctors had vast anatomical knowledge. To confirm this opinion, we merely have to examine some sculptures which have representations of human crania and other anatomical pieces. Thanks to their practice of quartering, they came to know more each day about the different kinds of articulation of the human body. Acoli was the articulation of the shoulder. Molitzli was the articulation of the elbow. Makechli was the articulation of the wrist. And Tlanquailt was the articulation of the knee. They were also familiar with the main details of the cardiac viscera. In the Ramirez Codex, a manuscript of the 16th century entitled Narration of the Origin of the Indians Who Inhabit New Spain, according to their histories, we read the following. The high priest carried in his hand a large, very sharp, and wide knife made of flint. The sacrificers would take the prisoners who was to be sacrificed to the gods, 2 holding his feet and 2 holding his hands. They would throw him on his back, on top of a great sharply pointed rock, where the 5th minister would attach a collar to his neck, and the high priest with rare celerity would open his chest with a sharp knife. Pulling out the heart with his hands and salivating, he would offer the heart to God, notes Duran. Dr. Fernando Oscaranza, in his extraordinary book, The History of Medicine in Mexico, shows that for Mexican physicians, each part of the human body had its special name. The head was Totzontecan, the throat was El Pantli, and in this way each part of the organisms received a determined name. The tongue was Nene Pilli, and the skin was Cualt. The internal organs did not escape their notice. Thus the lungs were called Tochichi, the stomach Totlatlatlitzan, and the spleen El Comaji. Thus proceeds the list of Nahuatl words, which were used by the Aztec doctors to express every anatomical detail. Since it would be verbose to continue, let these examples suffice. Within the limits of the age in which they were destined to live and flourish, those physicians had more than elementary concepts of the different organic functions. They knew, for example, of the circulation of the blood. They even became aware of the throbbing at the tip of the heart. This they called tetequicalitztli. The radical pulse was called trahualt. Sickness in general was called kokoji or kokoli. The word sahualt was the name given to smallpox, and tepitonsahualt was the name given to measles, small leprosy. So think about that. They say that the Europeans brought smallpox. So why would Indians have a word for it if they didn't already have that over here? That's why that whole them being exterminated by disease only. That's the hijack they try to add a lot of the time because they murdered and enslaved a lot of them and reclassified them. Beyond the shadow of a doubt, one of the most disastrous epidemics for the Mexicans was smallpox, brought to Mexico by a Negro. And then they try to blame the black man when the so called Mexicans were Negroes too. You see how the hijack, you gotta dodge the hijack, guys. So they try to blame the so called Negro when all the Spaniards, most of them at that time, were so called Negroes. So dodge the hijack. All right, so, anyways, let's read what it's saying. Brought to Mexico by a Negro who came along with the army of Pamphilo de Narvaez, who came to put the Extremeñan Hernan Cortez in order. Fray Juan de Torquemada refers to the incident in this way. While the Indians were occupied, combating the invaders, at the beginning of 1520, the pestilence of smallpox, measles, and blisters erupted with such force that a great number of people in New Spain died. It all began in the province of Chalco and lasted 60 days. Among the dead were many Mexicans of King Cuitlahuatzin, who, having just been elected, reigned no more than 40 days. Many other important people died, along with old soldiers and valiant men who protected the people in the event of war. You see, that's crazy. So the warriors and kings died, because of the smallpox, supposedly because of the one Negro, huh? See how they try to say, like, oh, it was this one Negro that brought it. Like, man, there's a lot of hijacking all this, guys. This is in modern interpretations, right? Historical inferences, as they call them. So this pestilence was a sharp blow for these people, but a good omen for us, since by means of this, a great part of the Indian population perished. Oh man, you see. So that was according to the words of Juan de Torquemada. So we gotta dodge a little hijack, but he's praising the Indians dying. You see how these people were, right? Motolina assures us about this particular detail, that the epidemic, which was also called Teozahualt, divine pimple, wow, destroyed half of the population of Mexico. Fray Jerónimo de Mendieta says that the pestilence left no healthy corner untouched in New Spain. At the height of the epidemic, the Aztecs, following their ancient customs, bathed together, the healthy and the ill, causing thereby a greater contagion of the epidemic. Yeah. Hey, you sure you didn't murder and enslave the rest of them and send them to the Caribbean and North America? Truly, the therapeutic arsenal at the disposal of the Aztec doctors was quite ample. It consisted principally of vegetable substances applied in sundry forms. Use was also made of mineral substances like lime, tenextale, sulfur, tlaquixtlali, and others. Francisco Javier Clavijero, one of the most famous historians of Mexico, wrote the following about this matter. Mexican physicians made use of infusions, cooked things, poultices, ointments, and oil, all of which was sold on the market, as Cortes and Bernal Diaz, as eyewitnesses confirmed. Hernan Cortes describes the market at Tlatelolco in this way. This city was another grand plaza, about twice the size of the city of Salamanca. All right, twice as bigger as the city in Spain. They're telling you how big this city was right here, right? Tlatelolco. Cortez again says the city was twice the size of the city of Salamanca, with portals all around daily. More than 60,000 souls buy and sell there. And there are all kinds of merchandise which can be found all over the world. Which can be found all over the world? What? Hold up. What? Listen, guys. Cortez is saying he went to the market and he's saying he's finding items that are from all over the world. So first of all, why would the Indians have these items? Right? It's something subliminal here. I told you trade already existed. We've been going all around the world trading our foods and our corn and all that. Right? So we had other things from other parts of the world too. They're admitting it right here. There are also provisions of victuals, jewelry made of gold and silver, lead, copper, tin, stones, bones, snail shells, and feathers. All right, jewelry, lime and cut stones, as well as uncut stones, rabbits, hares, deer, and small castrated dogs raised for food are sold. There is a street of herb shops where there are every kind of root and medicinal herb, which can be found on earth. Again, so listen to this. So they got a herbal store with every herb on earth, even stuff that grows in Hindustan and Asia and Africa, right? That's what they're telling you here. So how did the Indians have all this stuff? They were already seafaring and trading even before Columbus and them arrived. You know, like right up to the time Columbus arrived is what I mean. Our history is false, guys. Listen to what they're telling you here. They're literally dropping, you know, snitching on themselves right here. So every herb in the world can be found in this Mexica markets, right? Herbal markets. These are houses, sorry, there are houses like pharmacies where prepared medicine, potable medicine, ointments, and poultices are sold. There are also barber shops where heads are washed and shaved. I the barber shops, the corner barber shop. You see the culture? These barber shops, herbal stores, markets. Come on now. Bernal Diaz del Castillo, historian par excellence, confident in his prodigious memory, decades after the great events had taken place, also wrote about his impressions of the market at Tlatelolco. He says, as there are so many details to relate, we would never finish if we mentioned them all. Among the say things are paper, which is called a malt, internodes of perfume, liquid amber, tobacco, other yellow ointments, and things of this sort, which were readily sold in the porticos of the plaza, where herbs and other articles could also be found. Okay, perfumes, man, anointments, oils and all that. Come on, guys. Cooked things, macerated things, dry powder, oil, etc. All right, dry powder is like the ones you put on your feet and stuff, and the oils, etc. Everything were the common form of administering vegetable medicaments, which the Europeans greatly admired, and which the ancient Mexicans used to employ as laxatives, emetics, antiemetics, diuretic, and sudorific drugs. Ocytocico, abortifacients, abortifacients, wow, parasite, oh wow, parasiticides, parasiticides, right, to get rid of the parasites, anti-diarrhea remedies, etc. All right, sorry, bear with me with the reading. A lot of big words here, guys. All right. It says surgery among the Mexicans achieved a high degree of development, perhaps because of the continual wars in which they were intensely engaged with their territorial neighbors. Aztec physicians excelled in what we call traumatic medicine. Bloodletters were also quite dexterous, and in this respect, Clavijero notes the following. It was very common among the Mexicans and other people of Anahuac to have recourse to bloodletting, which their doctors performed with skill and assurance, using itztli, lancets. Country folk practiced bloodletting with the sharp ends of the maguey plant. They needed no help from specialists, nor did they have to stop working. In place of bloodsuckers, the quills of the American porcupine, which have a hole at the tip, were used. Okay, you guys hear that? With regard to surgery among the Mexicans, the Spanish conquerors themselves assure us from their own experience that wounds were cured with promptness and ease. Cortez himself was completely cured of serious wounds, which he received in the famous Battle of Otompan or Otumba, and this cure was due to physicians from Tlaxcala. All right, the Indians healed him, man. Damn. Doctors endeavored to treat face wounds with such care that no pronounced scars would remain. Wow. Sahagún tells us that doctors endeavored to treat face wounds with such care that no pronounced scars would remain. Sahagún tells us that cuts and wounds on the nose after an accident had to be treated by suturing with hair from the head and by applying to the stitches and the wound white honey and salt. After this, if the nose fell off or if the treatment was a failure, an artificial nose took the place of the real one. Wow. Cosmetical surgery. Come on now. They put in fake noses like Michael Jackson. Come on, man. You see, that goes way back. Wounds on the lips had to be sutured with hair from the head. Wow. And afterwards, melted juice from the maguey plant called meuji was poured on the wound. If, however, after the cure an ugly blemish remained, an incision had to be made and the wound had to be burned and sutured again with hair and treated with melted meuji. Wow. You see what they were doing, guys? You see that cosmetic surgery, fixing up, wounds and stuff so it doesn't leave scars on your face and all that. That's crazy. In this book, we have collected 34 accounts of 15 authors whose contribution to the history of medicine in ancient America is of great value, as it constitutes a magnificent spring to drink from in search of full knowledge of the medical sciences in the 16th century, which undertakes the fusion and close connection of the autochthonous culture with that of the conqueror, which resulted from that violent clash of metal against clay, and which heralded the commencement of a new culture and a new race. We are aware of the fact that there exist many more volumes in which abundant important documents concerning the history of medicine can be found, like those which make up this book. Let the material here gathered stand, as it presents extremely absorbent aspects of pre-Hispanic medical sciences, which have never failed to arouse fascination with our brilliant historic past. All right, and check out this image right here. You guys see? So I guess every part of the body has a name, as they were showing. Look at that pero. What's that? The ear? That pointing at the ear or something like that. Dog. See that? The head, the forehead, the tongue. Let me just come out. Wow, look at this, guys. They got the chakras and everything. Look at the kundalini. Look at the kundalini. Homeboy say, Kundalini, what's that? Yeah, look at this. Wow. You see? The true old world, man. Look at that. Wow. The rose. Wow. So we're going to go on to the next part of this book. Some more images right here. And now we go to this part of the book, and it says here, Jose de Acosta. So, we read his books. He was talking about how they resemble the Israelites and the Hebrew people, all that, Anyways, it says, number 1, liquid amber and other oils and drugs brought from the Indies. In the order of importance, after balsam, liquid amber is greatly esteemed. It is another liquid which is also aromatic, medicinal, and thick, and which solidifies and becomes paste, of a warm constitution and of a fragrant odor, and which is applied to wounds and other necessities. I refer to doctors, especially to Dr. Mornardes, who in the first part of his book wrote of this liquid and many other kinds of medicines from the Indies. Liquid amber comes also from New Spain, which is without doubt abundant in these gums, liquids, and tree juices. Consequently, there are copious sources for diverse materials for perfumes and medicines, such as resin, which is found in great quantities, copal and white copal, or copal, which is another kind, storax and incense, which also has excellent effects and a beautiful odor, for perfume making. Takamahak and karana are also medicinal. Fir oil, also brought from those parts, is greatly used by doctors and painters, the former for poultices and the latter for varnish. The drumstick tree, which grows amply in Hispaniola, is used for medicinal purposes. It is a large tree and bears fruit in the form of stalks with pulp. The ship which brought me from Santo Domingo carried 48 quintals of drumstick wood. Wow. So, guys, right now we are getting an account of Jose de Acosta. This is from the, I believe, 1500s. He might be from the 1600s, but I think most likely it's from the 1500s if I remember correctly. That's the account we're getting right now. Okay, just so you guys can understand what we're reading right now. He's saying, that's why he said he brought me from Santo Domingo, carried 48 quintals of drumstick wood. Sarsaparilla is not less known as a cure for thousands of ailments. On the same ship, 50 quintals were brought from the same island. There is an abundance of sarsaparilla in Peru and in the regions of Guayaquil below the equator. Many people go there for cures, and in their opinion, the ordinary water which they drink is healthful, since it is placed into the contact with these roots above mentioned. Wow. By the way, against the effect of perspirin, it is not necessary to wear special coverings such as blankets. The wood from Guayacan, also called lignum vitae, holy wood. All right, listen, holy wood or wood from the Indies. Holy wood is wood from the Indies. Again, holy wood is actually wood from the Indies, from the Americas. Come on now. Grows extensively in those islands. All right. Holy wood all over the Caribbean, man. We call Palo Santo, and we actually do burn that here. I didn't realize that's what we're talking about right now. Yeah, we I go to certain stores here and I buy Hollywood Palo Santo. It's a stick. It smells really good. You burn it. It's like an incense, but it's actually wood. All right. It is as heavy as iron and sinks in water. The same fleet brought so many pieces, 120,000, that we could barely set sail. Red Brazilian wood is famous for the construction of huts and other uses. 34 quintals arrived on the same voyage from the same island. There are so many other kinds of aromatic wood, gum, oil, and drugs in the Indies that it is not possible to mention them all, nor is it necessary. Again, we're getting Jose Acosta's primary source right here, guys, from way back. Let me just say that in the time of the kings of the Incas of Cusco and the kings of Mexico, there were many great men who treated sickness with simple medicines and performed exceptional cures with their knowledge of the diverse powers and properties of herbs, roots, and plants growing there, which are totally unknown in Europe. Totally unknown, you know? Wow. Again, we're getting an account from 400 to 500 years old right here, guys. Among these simple things, there are myriads of laxatives such as the Mechoacan root, Puna pine nuts, guanaco preserve, guanaco, fig oil, and 100 other things which, when properly and opportunely applied, are not any less effective than those which come from the East. He who has read what Monardus has written in the first two parts of his book realizes that he also has a profuse treatment of tobacco, which has been used successfully against poison. Tobacco is a small tree, quite common but specially gifted. There is also mention of contrierva and other plants. The creator of all things so ordered creation in his wisdom that he did not wish anything to be without use in the world. Wow, you see? Now he's quoting Genesis. And where are they finding all this again? In the Americas, right? In a true garden, a true terrestrial paradise, right? And Most High made everything for use for us, man. In the world, he says, knowing this and knowing how to make use of this knowledge, man proclaims another of God's gifts, okay? Dr. Francisco Hernandez also wrote a famous work on this matter, or medicinal plants and liquids from the Indies. He had a special commission from His Majesty to paint all the plants in their natural form from the Indies, which according to popular opinion number more than 1,200. It is affirmed that this work cost more than 60,000 ducats. He had a special commission from His Majesty to paint all the plants in their natural form from the Indies, which according to popular opinion number more than 1,200. All right, so I think the Acosta's from the 1600s possibly, because it's already been like 100 years they've been there. So there's people writing books. He's talking about these books from his time. Like he's quoting other books from his time, writing about the medicinal practices of the Americans. Like this is crazy right here. This is cool. Dr. Nardo Antonio, an Italian doctor attracted by this study, produced a digest. I would recommend these sources to those who want to go deeper into the subject of plants from the Indies, especially in the medicinal field. Wow, that's crazy. So he's quoting probably books that could be from the 1,500 years older than him, or from his time, 1600. If you guys want to look for them, yeah, they have more on this drop right here, medicinal practices. And we continue with Jose Acosta's accounts. Part 2 of his account, it says, anointment used by Mexican sorcerers. That's the hijack. They call it shamans and doctor sorcerers. Even if there's some that are doing good stuff or others doing bad stuff, they're mixing them all together. Anyways, God in the old dispensation ordered the manner in which Aaron and the other priests were to be consecrated. The law of the gospel also mentions holy chrism and anointment, which is used when Christian priests are ordained. The old law also indicated a certain fragrant substance whose use God prohibited except for divine cult. The devil has wanted to change all this to fit in with his own schemes, and as usual, he devises things so perverse and shameful that they themselves reveal their author. So now this is him judging the Indians, right? He's saying, oh, they're not supposed to use these oils like this, that, whatever he thinks of them. He might be right, he might be wrong, depending on what they're doing with it, right? He could be practicing white magic or black magic or whatever, or curing people or casting spells, right? So it depends. Anyways, gotta dodge the hijack. Remember, this is from 1600. So it says, the priests of idols in Mexico were anointed in the following manner. So the priests of idols, right? That could be his interpretation. They anointed themselves from head to foot and all over their hair. Their hair too, huh? They bathed themselves with the ointment. In their hair, they formed braids. Listen, they formed braids in their hair. Are we talking about locks? Anointment oils that hold your hair together? Listen, are we talking about locks? You seen the codices? You seen some of the hieroglyphics, right? Anyways, let's continue. It says, in their hair, they formed braids, which looked like the mane of horses. The braids were tied together in a special way. All right, so we're talking about braids. And with the passage of time, their hair grew so long that it reached the backs of their knees. And the weight that their heads had to bear was so great that it gave them great difficulty, since they never cut it or trimmed it up to the moment of their death or until they retired as old men or were placed in other honorary positions in the republic. I'm picturing long locks, like, even because braids, light hair, heavier hair, picture like a Rastaman long, his dreadlocks long, those are heavy, right? Like that's how they're talking, describing it, right? Continue, says these braids were covered with cotton braids 6 fingers in width. Okay. So I want to go back. They had an image here of some herbs. I just want to show you guys. Come on, there we go. So this is some of the ways they were describing or drawing the herbs, in their books back then. Just so you guys can see. Right. Tomatsli. That tomato was that. All right. Continuing, says the smoke which produced soot was ordinarily made by a torch, since ancient custom, greatly revered, had always dictated this particular offering to their gods. The priests were always anointed with this suit from head to foot, okay? They looked burned. They looked burned, huh? This was their ordinary anointment, except when they were going to offer sacrifice and burn incense in the forests, on mountaintops, and in dark, dreadful caves where their idols were kept. On these occasions, a different ointment was used. These ceremonies took place to expel fear and to instill courage. This ointment was made of various insects, such as spiders, scorpions, and snakes. All poisonous, huh? Schoolboys would collect them, and they were so dexterous that they were able to collect a great number when the priest asked for them. Their special occupation was to search for these bugs, and if they were doing something else, and by chance they came upon an insect, they would immediately set out to trap it. These Indians were not afraid of these poisonous insects. They would even deal with them as if they were not poisonous, since they had been brought up in this work. All right, they ain't afraid to handle Most High's creatures, right? To prepare the ointment from these bugs, the priest would put them all together and burn them in the brazier of the altar until they became ashes. Wow. Which then were placed together with tobacco, which is an herb used by the people to relax their bodies and to make them not feel tired. You see how they were using tobacco back then? To relax their bodies and not make them feel tired. Into mortars. The ashes were mixed with this herb, which produced a weakness. Into the mixture of this herb and ash were thrown scorpions, live spiders, and centipedes, which when mixed together were kneaded. Then ground seed called ololuchki was added. Ololuchki is drunk by the Indians to have visions, but its effects deprives them of reason. This is how you him judging them, right? These seeds were ground with hairy worms whose hair has poison. All of this was mixed with soot and placed in small pots and set before their gods. This was said to be the food for the gods and was thus called divine food. Huh. With this anointment, men became sorcerers who saw and spoke to the devil. Again, this is his version of it. He could be right, he could be wrong, very wrong. All right, they could be doing some hijack, or they could be doing something else totally different that he's misinterpreting. Right? We just gotta have an open mind with both things, guys, because you know that's Deuteronomy 28. We kind of fell off at some point, and we were doing kind of things, right? Even the Israelites in the Bible started, worshiping idols and practicing what their wives were doing, falling off. Anyways, I could be wrong too. This could be some very different thing that he's trying to say is devilish, right? Anointed with this oil, the priests lost all fear and became cruel. In this way, they killed during sacrifices and did so with great courage. At night, they would go alone to the mountains and dark caves, and scorning the beasts there, they were certain that tigers, lions, wolves, snakes, and other beasts which inhabit those regions would run away, frightened by their butmen. And even though they did not flee because of this butmen, they certainly would run away, frightened by the appearance of the devil into whose aspect the priest had been transformed. Oh man. This butmen was also used to cure the sick and children. For this reason, it was called divine medicine. People, therefore, came from all parts to see the priests as if they had been saviors, so that they could give them the divine medicine and anoint the ailing parts of their bodies. It is affirmed that this medicine produced notable relief. This must have happened because tobacco and ololuchki have power to relax the body per se. These effects were even greater when these two herbs were mixed with all kinds of poisonous things. That's interesting, guys. Listen. As pain was relieved, the people thought that these cures were miracles. I don't think, that's his interpretation, right? They had recourse to these priests as if Norent, as if they had saints. Okay. These priests cheated and deceived these ignorant people by persuading them to use their medicine and participate in their diabolic ceremonies. Their authority was so great that everything they said was taken as an article of faith. And we continue with Jose Acosta's account from 1600s of medical practices of the ancient Indians. Again, this is a primary source. This is where they're getting it from, his book, which we have read parts of it before. It says here, part 3, conception and growth of children. Father Jimenez tells us that Indian women, quiche, of Mayan nations, the quiche, quiche. So the women of the quiche of the Mayan nations would go to the springs to pray for a child. And when they were about to give birth, they would have recourse to sorceresses who would make them believe their lies by putting under their beds an idol of the devil called Ichel, who was the god of childbirth, according to Landa. Is that really was all going on, or is it really going on, right? They would cut the umbilical cord of the child with a knife made of obsidian, and they would spread the blood on the ear of a corn, which they would sow. If it grew well until the child would be able to sow it himself, then he would have a long, healthy life. Wow. Some Mayan groups had the custom of deforming the heads of their children. The head of the child was placed between two boards, tied together in such a way that the head would acquire strange shapes as it grew. Pride was taken in being cross-eyed. All right? Pride was taken in being cross-eyed or cockeyed, right? Mayan mothers caused this in their children. What? By hanging an object from their hair, which reached the space between their eyebrows. In addition to this incised teeth incisors were sharpened, and at times pieces of jade or pyrite were inlaid. Moreover, the ears were painted red or the ears were pierced. Right? They're doing this to babies and children, right? Adding jade jewelry to their teeth, right? And making them cross-eyed. That's kind of crazy right there. Once children were born, they were bathed at once. And immediately after undergoing the torment of having their foreheads and heads flattened, they were taken to the priest, who could predict their fate and tell what position they would have in life and give them different names until they were baptized. Mothers would go into sumpuliche, a steam bath, or temazcal, a remedy always employed by women who have just given birth or by sick women. When children reach their third or fourth birthday, they are baptized according to the ceremonies already described. Fathers give special care to boys, rearing them from the very beginning in male customs, and mothers teach their daughters female obligations. When the children can scarcely stand up on their little legs, they are taken to the field to learn how to help their fathers. They learn about birds and plants. They learn to be careful of ants and poisonous snakes. When the children are older, they are taught to worship the gods of sowing and hunting. See, everything to them, to this guy is a god. I don't think everything was a god to the Indians, right? But that's his interpretation. Anyways, education was a kind of domestication, since children would learn the basic things to be able to accommodate to their daily environment. It's like an apprenticeship. They are practicing it as they're growing up, right? Only the children of the nobles or the priests would be admitted to the preschools, where they would learn the higher sciences of Mayan culture. They would learn to read and to write the Mayan hieroglyphics. They would learn to rule like rulers of nations, whether small or great. They would learn to officiate as priests in ceremonies. They would learn how to command troops in war. Their system was quite similar to the European organization during the Middle Ages. Just like the ones in the Middle Ages, when only the privileged class was admitted to the closed circle of knowledge. The children grew up and reached puberty. It was now time to choose a partner. But indeed, the courtship of the Mayan young man was hardly romantic. First, he would approach his father, telling him that he wanted to marry a certain girl. The father would look for the venerable matchmaker of the place, who would talk to the girl's father. If the young suitor was acceptable, a price for the girl was agreed on according to her social position, her beauty, and the economic possibilities of the boy. Both father and son were admitted to the girl's home, and each time that the young couple met there, the girl's father had to be given gifts. All right, so They still practice this in the old world culture, supposedly, right? They still practice this in other parts of the world, and the Indians do still too. And it wasn't because, oh, this is an African thing or it's an Asian thing. The Americans did this as well. Again, this is a true old world. In the modal dictionary of the Mayan language, the word tsa or tsa is found. It means the man who asks for the hand of another's daughter for his son by offering gifts of precious beads and stones. So that little word means all that. Father Jimenez tells us that the Mayan man of the Altiplano pays for the woman with a bow and two arrows, lives with her in his father in law's house, and later takes her wherever he wants before the year is out. He can leave her, but after a year passes, he cannot. Kogu Judo adds that according to custom among the natives, the husband of a woman who did not have any children had the right to sell her unless the father agreed to pay back the price the husband had originally paid. Wow. The reason behind all this was the desire to have children and the idea that the childless woman did not produce wealth. All right, guys, here we go to another account from another person from those times, 1500s, 1600s. This is what they wrote. So, this is what this book is showing, different accounts of what they were saying regarding their medical practices. So, in this case, we got Francisco Cervantes de Salazar. So, we know he was like it's the same Cervantes de Salazar that we read in the prologue. He got a little hijacked, so we might have to dodge some hijack with what he's saying, but let's pull out the babies, right? So it says here, part 4 by Francisco Cervantes de Salazar, according to him, right? Primary sources, physicians and sorcerers. The great part of the Indian physicians and surgeons were superstitious sorcerers who took no account either of the condition of bodies or the quality of nourishment. They are so inept that if one asks them today about the powers of herbs and powders used to cure about the time of their application, they would not know the answer, but would merely respond by saying that their ancestors cured in that way. So we got this already early. He's talking shit like, oh, they can't even explain how they know all that. So what? They're practicing it. Did you know all that? So he's talking little shit. All right, let's just continue, all right? They would not know the answer, but would merely respond by saying that their ancestors cured in that way. By answering thus, they think that they have done not a little. Consequently, patients run a great risk by going to see these men. For if they are cured, luck had great part to play in the process. There have always been charlatans who, in some of their treatments to gain a good reputation, make the patient, who, for example, has a toothache, believe that they will extract a worm which is causing the pain. By cleaning the patient's molars with cotton, he discovers the worm. In this way, with such miserable bumpkins, the doctors gain fame and fortune. Believe the patient as afflicted as before. Others claim that they remove thorns from the heart, perpetrating deceptions similar to the mentioned above. However, experience has taught the Indians that the illness of the spleen can be cured by inserting a long thin needle through the side of the spleen to drain off the liquid causing the illness. Those with knowledge cure principally with beverages which they call patles, which are extremely dangerous since they can snuff out life in an instant. With these beverages, pregnant women abort, and doctors say that this remedy helps at the moment of parturition. They are also familiar with some butterflies, which are so poisonous that by imbibing them once, they are made powder. One is killed immediately, and if the powder taken is from the same butterflies but younger, one is killed in 10 days. If the butterflies are very small and newly born, they little by little take away the life of a person who imbibes the powder. So I don't know what butterfly is this poisonous. Damn. So now I get what he's doing. So this guy really hates the Indians. So he's just talking shit about the bad things he saw. Like he didn't cure him. He's telling him, they were trying everything. I'm sure everybody's not a shaman or whatever. And how does he know they're not getting cured? Anyways, he's literally just talking shit, but they added this account here. So we're just reading through it, okay, guys? In the mind of a hijack. Let's go. These doctors also have the custom, in the case of falls, of stripping the patient, rubbing his body, stretching his limbs, and turning him over to step on his back. I saw this myself and heard the patient say that he felt better. There are great quakes among these doctors who prescribe herbs to reconcile people with their enemies and to make them forget their rancor by art of the devil, since it is not due to any other art. Dodge the hijack. Come on now. They could be giving him herbal remedies, and just, they could be healing. He's just interpreting it. Either way, you can tell there's hate there from this guy with the Indians, right? So many sorcerers are transformed into figures of different kinds of animals, like the lion or tiger. Huh. When they transform into their jaguars, right? Jaguar, were jaguar. Once a Spaniard stabbed a lion which was going to carry off a boy. And you see how they call them lions and tigers? They can talk about pumas and jaguars and stuff, or do they really talking about tigers and lions, huh? The next day, the same Spaniard found an Indian sorcerer wounded in the same place where he had wounded the lion. Many Spaniards claim to have seen this. Each believes what seems best to him, and the devil can deceive many. Everything's blame the devil for everything, right? There are quack doctors who make that which was lost appear again and reveal the person who hid it. They even relate news about people who are far away. Example, if they are well or ill. These sorcerers and witches, to predict whether a patient would recover or die, would place an idol called Quetzalcoatl, which means the plum serpent, before him. They would then sit down on a straw mat, place on a blanket, and like dice players, would throw 20 grains of corn on the ground. If the grains separated and left open spaces, the sorcerers would predict that the patient would die. If, however, the grains made a pile, he would live, and the illness he suffered from was caused by witchcraft. Wow. So, that's his interpretation. Hey, how does he know that stuff don't work, right? Or whatever they're doing. All this was possible because the devil teaches his wiles to his followers, among whom are these sorcerers, so that these can deceive others. The worst of all is that even Spanish men and women believe this and are used to serve the sorcerers' needs and wickedness. They are not aware of the fact that they are acting against us. Man himself is cannot and should not be cured except by natural means such as medicine. Well, this is medicine to them, right? You know. So, we got to take this with a grain of salt, some of it, but try to interpret what he's seeing, right? Try to interpret what he's seeing. And then it goes on to another account. Hopefully, this guy is not so much hijacked like this last guy. But we're going to leave this for another video, guys. Just wanted to go ahead and read this a little bit, get an introduction of the book. And we're going to add the rest of the following info with other books, other medicinal books talking about the ancient Americans, medical practices. So we're going to try to find more and add it with this one while we read these other accounts, okay? But I still hope you enjoyed the reading, today, whether it was brief or not, whether you thought it taught you something or not, At least you have the reference of the book if you'd like to get it. I have a copy of this book on my Patreon page. I uploaded yesterday just in case you'd like to have the PDF. And it's in Spanish and English, if you guys didn't notice. Like everything is translated to Spanish and English, right? Here's the Spanish part right here, right? So, appreciate you guys, coming through today. Hope you enjoyed it again. There is so much to learn when it comes to medical practices of the ancient Americans, because this is the true old world. A lot of the things, the origins of these medical practices around the world, started here. Started here with the copper-colored tribes of America. Again, this book was Medical Practices in Ancient America by Miguel Guzman Pareto. All right, the copper-colored tribes of America. He's fixing a broken leg. Look at that. That a cast. Look, he built a cast, broken leg or whatever. We're probably gonna get to that in another part of this book. But again, I'll give you your day back, guys. I'm still recovering from my nerve injury. It's not as painful. It's not as painful as previous days. I have hope now. I'm like, I'm feeling like more hopeful. I'm like, my spirit's a little more up. It still hurts at times, sometimes intensely, but not as much as before. But we're still healing. And so I'm taking care of myself, still doing this, recording from my phone in my bed still. All right. Gonna go pick up my wife from the airport today, coming back from Boston. Now my daughter's over there with her family and my other cousins. So she's gonna do college over there. May Allah bless her. I'm gonna miss her. I'm excited about my wife coming back. I do miss her, and she is a big part of my life. Does a lot for me. Helps me out so much. It gets crazy when she's not here. But yeah, appreciate you guys tuning in. All right. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Hawaii.